Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, we're back with Imaam sir. Imaam Yusha, mashallah. We got together, I think on day 3, was it?
I think so, yes.
A very, I think an intensive discussion we had.
Alhamdulillah.
And the fiqh of Ramadan.
Yes.
And some spicy questions came in. And I want to start from exactly where we left.
Okay.
We left on this note that inshallah we will come back and discuss some of the work you do outside of the masjid, which is to do with your role you play on a regularity board, auditing for halal and haram foods, products. And in a nutshell, if I want to describe to our viewers, we're going to go through as many examples as we can do in trying to understand the products that we consume.
Yeah.
To what extent are they halal? How are they halal? Are they halal? And alhamdulillah, we are fortunate for the viewers and for the podcast that Imaam Sahib actually plays a significant role in auditing and going through verifying whether products are halal or haram.
Yes.
And I mentioned last podcast when you were here, it's very possible many of the products that you've picked up from your local supermarkets have been audited by Imaam Sahib, who is on screen.
Yes.
Nobody would know, but this is the hard work ulama do. And just on that note, many times Imam Sahib, it's people see Imams only in the masjid.
Yes.
And they look down upon. That the only role they play is like namazi padai.
Yes.
It's just a janazah he's done.
Yeah.
Does an adhan, does a salah, that's all they do. But what exactly is it that you do? Let's delve into that for a minute.
So
in outside of the masjid.
Yes. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So in terms of myself, you asked the question, of course, there's the role in the community and the masjid. Outside of that, I'm a pharmacist by profession, so I run my own pharmacy, and obviously I serve the community in that respect. But more in terms of a role which is also connected with Deen and Islam and is also the work of Deen is this role that you mentioned in the halal regulation, halal certifying and so on, because ultimately that's a role service to the ummah. At the end of the day, a person in the halal consumer will pick up a product and will eat that product based on the work that I've done. And if I have done khiyanat in that, if I've made a mistake or I have deliberately done something wrong, I'm answerable on the day of judgment.
It's a huge
So
responsibility.
it's a huge responsibility. It's easy to talk about, but when you look at it philosophically, it is actually a huge responsibility. But that was one of the reasons that I did go into it, that at the end of the day, there needs to be people of understanding, people who understand both the culture, the countries in the West, and understand Masail of Deen.
And I wouldn't be wrong, you said that because of your professional pharmaceutical background
Yeah.
and your awareness of products and industry is what allowed you to also get into this, and I think would make you a more suitable candidate, at least, to be sat in that position.
Definitely. Look, first of all, if I to answer that question, I'll explain how the audit process works. So you mentioned a lot of the product. So this applies. So there's two main areas, if you like, of halal products. You've got the meat industry, which of course we have the slaughterhouses on the supply side of it, and then we have the meat shops on the high street retail side of it.
Okay.
And on the other side, and that's a very, very small fraction of the halal industry, very small fraction.
So many of us would limit halal understanding to just the meat.
To me, and this is it, this is the greatest misconception. The bulk of the work that's taking place is food processing. So what does that mean? The cereal that our kids are eating for breakfast, the bread that we're buying from the stores, the chocolates, the confectionery, everything literally that's on the table, from a jar of jam through to even a bottle of water, has often been through the halal certifying process. So that's where the bulk of the halal work goes.
Is there a particular board of ulama that you sit with?
So
how does it run?
So in the UK, we have two recognized halal bodies.
Okay.
So they are the HMC and we have the HFA. Now, the HMC predominantly deals with the meat industry and deals more with the retail. So on the high street, if you go to a meat shop, they might be certified by HMC and so on. The HFA, they do also the meat industry, but their main focus is food processing.
Okay.
And they deal with the supply side of things. So they deal with large corporations, and it's on their board that I sit as on the panel of ulama in terms of policy making, and also on behalf of them I conduct a lot of auditing. With the HMC it's quite simple because it's just meat related. There isn't the whole process involved with that.
I'm starting to understand now how HFA is much bigger
in that respect.
role.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think today's podcast is going to be quite groundbreaking. A lot of stuff that I think for myself will be new, and for the public as well. Okay. When I last rang you, I think it was over the weekend, and you said, I'm going out auditing.
Yes.
Describe a day for yourself. How would a day go?
So, as I said, there are clients, and I'll just mention all high street names that you are familiar with. For example, just today I was involved with auditing Weetabix, so Kellogg's, Walker's, all the brands which are famous and which you see. I'm involved with a lot of them. Bread, Hovis bread, for example. These are all a lot of the clients that we deal with, when it comes to the HFA and so on. So on a day, we will go out to the client, to the site. There's usually...
Will they be on the factory, or is it the warehouse, or is it just the office?
The manufacturing. So one of the conditions for us is that we must see and witness the manufacturing. Because we must have shahada, so we must witness that. So we will go to the factory, we will see the production, we will see everything from the delivery of the ingredients all the way through to the storage, then the manufacturing process, the packaging, and then the dispatch. So we look at the whole process.
Quite heavy, that.
It is, and it was an eye-opening for me, actually, when I first entered and I was interviewed.
When was that? When did you actually
So that was 2015, 16, Ghaliban.
And so good 8 years now.
Good 8-9 years ago. And I was, when I was interviewed and they spoke to me and had a conversation with me, and I then asked them, look, I need to understand what is it that you do. Is it something that I want to be involved in? And they showed me the audit form that's used. And it's a large document. There's two parts to the document. First, there's a policy document, which is all the clauses, these are all the standards that the company must adhere to meet, and then we will accept them and certify them. Then there's the audit process. Then it's all the questions and all the research and all the investigations which we conduct to fulfill those clauses and then complete the audit. So that's the process. And then what happens is that our findings from the audit go to a committee which is independent from the individuals who were involved in the audit. So for example, if I was involved in the audit, I can't sit in the decision-making committee.
How many people would audit? Let's say,
two.
This Weetabix example.
Two people will audit. And I'll tell you the reason for that. These companies such as HFA and HMC, they are certifiers. So HFA is a certifier, but they are then accredited. Who are they accredited by? They are accredited by governments and large government organizations. So for example, you have IAC, who is the government body of the UAE. So they will accredit us. They will come and audit us. They will come and witness us doing audits, and they will say, we are happy with you. We will accept your certification as meeting our standards. Therefore, you can now certify on our behalf. The Saudi government. So at the HFA, we are recognized globally by every Muslim country and every Muslim organization.
Is yours certification and auditing only limited to the UK? Or
No.
is it
Worldwide. So I myself have been to Europe innumerable times, various different locations.
Manufacturers out there.
Correct. So for example, the companies that make Oreo, Kraft Foods, you've heard, that's owned by a larger company called Mondelez, and they have, I can't remember the exact number of factories, but they're all around the world, Europe, Pakistan, even India.
You would audit them?
Things. So, yep, we will,
mashallah,
we'll audit them.
So this, again, for the viewers, this is the type of work ulama do in the background.
Yes.
Which we fail to appreciate, and we just look down upon the Maulvi's eyes, only a Maulvi's eyes. But everything, now, the way Imam Sal has just described it as well, everything has to go through this legal requirement.
Yes.
Question 1, is it a legal requirement?
So, no, it's not a legal requirement in the United Kingdom. However, in Muslim countries, and I say that in inverted commas, so, for example, in the UAE or in Saudi Arabia, they have actually done something very, very good. What they have said is that anything which passes our border and is sold in our country must
export or import?
Import
Okay.
into the UAE or Saudi Arabia or any of those, or Indonesia, Malaysia, any of the Muslim countries. They have to be halal certified, even if it's a bottle of water, even if it's a packet of salt. They will not allow entry. When it gets dropped at the border, the first thing that they say there, the staff, is show us your halal certificate. They then have to verify that is that halal certificate from one of the bodies which we have authorized.
Okay.
And if it's not, they will send the shipment back, say, sorry, we will not take it.
Okay.
So it's not a legal requirement in the United Kingdom, but yes, in Muslim countries, it is a legal requirement. Pakistan, no. They're a little bit behind in that respect. It is something that they should introduce, but at the minute, no, it's not, unfortunately.
Okay, so if it's not a legal requirement, then how strict are the laws here? And to what extent do we have to take an HFA certification then?
Look, the bottom line is this, that nobody, no member of the public has to accept the label of halal or haram by anybody. Okay, a person of knowledge can decide for themselves effectively. Yeah, but Allah says in the Quran, "Fas'alu ahla dhikr in kuntum la ta'lamun." Go to the people of knowledge in matters that you do not know. Not everybody can be an expert in everything, so you leave it to the experts. Hence, our role, or the halal body's roles, in terms of we or they are the experts, they do their job properly, and therefore the public and the ummah can then rely on the decisions that they make. Does the ummah, is it binding on the ummah? No, it's not binding on the ummah. They can decide to accept or reject that.
It's an individual choice, isn't it?
It's an individual choice. However, what the public need to understand is, as you have said yourself, the work that's being done and the level at which that work is being done, and with which integrity that work is being done, that it is very, very trustworthy, and they can accept that. And I'll tell you an example.
Because you've got international governing bodies involved, isn't it?
Absolutely, you've got governments involved.
So it's not a joke then, is it?
No, it's not. It's not. Absolutely.
It sounds very, very professional. Like you're saying, you've got two auditing individuals who are then independently scrutinized, and then it goes to the body, the board.
Yes.
The board then makes a decision, then it's certified.
Correct.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. That is it. And that is why when I saw that process, I thought, subhanAllah, you know what? This is good work taking place here. So I'll give you an example. There was, now, this is another big issue about stunned chicken.
Okay, before we go there, Imam Sahib, we've got a live question.
Okay, go on.
Ji, bismillah.
Walaikum assalam, rahmatullah.
So just a bit of clarity about HFA and so on. Obviously, it's quite surprising that you're working with the big brands, Weetabix, Walkers, and so on and so forth. Is that just in an export capacity, or is that in terms of when I get a box of Weetabix, there's no HFA stamp on it. So what's the and do Weetabix have to let you come and audit them, or can they reject you?
So it's question. A good question.
So just for the clarity, in case they've not been heard, can Weetabix deny you access into coming in and auditing?
So the question is, yes, they can. But if they deny access to us, they will no longer receive the certification, and they can no longer then export to those Muslim countries. And a lot of those countries are big business for them. For them, it's a business. Remember one thing, that for a lot of these companies, it's a business decision. It's not based on the fact that they want to be halal or they don't want to be, but what is the aim of any business is to reach as many consumers as possible so their products can sell.
On that, could there be a difference between what they're exporting and what they're producing
That's
here?
the good question. So a lot of the time, these companies only have certified the products which are being exported. Okay?
But not the ones that we have
Not
here.
necessarily, and
Okay.
I'll clarify that.
Okay.
So what happens is that those products which are being exported, because it's a legal requirement for the countries that they're going into, they have to be certified. But essentially, it's the same product which is being sold locally. They don't have, it's not, remember one thing, it's not cost effective from a business perspective to have two separate processes. Okay,
Yeah, makes sense.
so
Makes sense.
the line, the production line that we will certify
identical.
is the same line that they're producing on for the local market and producing on for the export market. Okay, so it's the same product. Now, in terms of, you mentioned the logo, halal logo on products, what you'll find is even though products are halal, a lot of manufacturers will not label them with the halal logo. And I've directly asked them this question, why don't you? Because it makes it easy for the consumer. I've said to them, you will increase your business.
You'll get
because,
more customers.
your customers, particularly in the West, Europe and America and Great Britain, people will pick up, look for the halal logo. As soon as they see it, eyes closed, they'll buy it. The challenge they have is this Islamophobia issue and this this whole misconception over our method of sacrificing. So there's big groups and so on that will protest against halal.
You've got the right-wing groups. Who are
The
always
right
gonna be
wing groups,
on the rise.
correct.
Okay.
So their fear is the backlash they get from these groups.
So could it not be the case that if politicians, Muslim and non-Muslim politicians alike, work on this and constitutionally push this through Parliament, through government, that companies should put this halal logo on there? Is that not something that we should look
It
into?
is something that can be done. Now, what you've basically allured to there is education on halal. Never mind non-Muslims and politicians and so on. Our own Muslim community are not educated when it comes to halal. As I said at the beginning, the thing that you immediately think of is meat and slaughtering. Okay,
Not processed.
Not processing. There's a big need for education. Number one, and then number two, yes, going through formal channels to implement solutions. The challenge we have there is the traditional challenge we've had in Islam always in the different schools of thought. As you know yourself, mashallah, you are a reputable scholar and Imam yourself, Hafiz Saab, you know that in the different schools of thought, even on what is halal and haram, there is a difference of opinion on. So that then becomes confusing, particularly for non-Muslims, that, well, what policy do we implement? Do we implement a Hanafi policy, a Hanbali policy, a Shafi policy? Because if we adopt the Hanafi position, then the Shafis are going to be like, well, you've said that crustaceans are haram, they're halal for us. What are you talking about?
Generally, some people is the way around. The
Absolutely.
Shafis are allowing everything, then the Hanafis are like, how's everything just being made halal?
Exactly.
Because the
You're
moment
right,
you see
actually.
the halal logo, you'll be like, okay, it's halal then, isn't it?
But the funny thing is, the halal logos that we see when we go abroad, they are all the two of the biggest accreditors. Remember I said there's certifiers and there's the accreditors from behind. The accreditors, two of the biggest ones are the Malaysian bodies and Indonesian bodies, because they own the bulk of the market in the world.
Okay.
They're the bulk. If you look at it from a numbers perspective and a financial perspective, their markets are the largest markets. So, and they're mostly Shawafi. So they will follow the Shafi. So when we audit and will authorize or certify anything going to those countries, we'll make sure that it conforms to the Shawafi school of thought.
Their understanding. Okay.
Now, the Muslim consumer who doesn't know about this will go to Malaysia, will go to Thailand, will go to even Saudi Arabia, other parts of the world, pick up a product and it will say halal on it and they will eat it, not knowing, well, I'm a Hanafi or I'm a Hanbali, I'm not a Shafi, is this suitable for me or not? You see, so that's where then the challenges begin to arise in terms of policy making. But you're right, work needs to be done. But before that work, awareness and education needs to be created.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think we've got another live question.
Yes.
G.
I think Imam Saab's already touched on. I've got two questions. One was the different schools of thought. My question would have been, how did Imam Saab use that As in, how do you tackle that problem in terms of when you're auditing, right? 'Cause,
Absolutely.
but then you answer that it's depending on which country it's been exported to.
Yes,
So
number one, depending on the country. But we here, our organization, like the HFA, for example, I don't know if you will remember, I know it's before our time, but Dr. Kaleem Siddiqui is a name that was well known.
Yep,
He actually set up the HFA with a few others. There was Allama Sardar Qadri Sahib, who used to be in Eccles here. So he's still on our board. And a few other individuals. They're the ones who set up the HFA, and they were Hanafi. So back then it wasn't doing the work that it's doing now. It's developed, of course, over the last 30 years. But essentially, we operate according to the Hanafi school of thought. Then we will make adaptations, within the framework of the Quran and Sunnah and thing to cater for any individual requirements, whether that be Shafi requirements or otherwise.
Nice.
One more question on that was, just for a better understanding, initially you mentioned there's different factories of products around the world.
Yes.
So, when I've travelled in the past,
Yes.
Prime example is, I'm going to say, I like my M&M sweets.
Okay, yeah.
Right? The
M&M's is a good one.
The yellow ones,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
So every time I travel to Turkey or any of them countries, I'll always get them because it says halal on them.
Yes.
My understanding was because it's in that country, it's probably produced there, and then hence why halal meat is being used. But from what you're just mentioning, that these companies, when they create the products, they're all the same. So are you saying that the M&M's that I have, for example, in a supermarket here as the Tesco, doesn't have the halal certification? It's exactly the same as the packet that says halal in Turkey. In
one word, the answer to your question is yes, they're the same. Now let me explain that. The first thing is, I've already said it doesn't make sense financially. It's not viable for companies to have two separate processes. But the other thing with that also is the quality as well. When any manufacturer creates a product, they have it conforming to a certain standard and a certain criteria. If now you start using different ingredients, that will affect the taste and quality of that product. Yes. Hence, it's always the same. Now, the issue that you mentioned of M&M's is a good one, because why is there this stigma and this social media drive to inform people, I would say misinform people, that M&M's are haram? I'll tell you why, because it's based on the red colouring. The red colouring, which they call cochineal, there's another name as well, just gone from my mind right now, but it's essentially the red, orange, and sometimes yellow colouring. And the way that colouring is produced is that there's the shell of an insect, and the red colouring is derived from there, then it's diluted to make orange and yellow and so on. And because it comes from an insect, people will say that is haram. However,
because it's coming from the shell of the
insect, they're saying it's haram. Okay? But what they don't know is the process that I've just described. All they know it's come from an insect, it's haram. However, now, looking at the schools of thought again, the Shawafi don't regard insects as haram anyway. So
for them, it's
completely halal. It's a no problem area. Right. So that's fine. But then even in the Hanafi school of law, there's a principle of istihala or tabdil al-mai, but even without going into that technicality at this stage, it's coming from a chemical contained in the shell of the insect. The insect is intact, the shell is intact, the shell itself or any part of the insect is not in that colouring. It's just chemicals derived from the shell which cause that colouring. So on that basis, it's halal. So I've actually seen the process with my eyes. And therefore, when I saw it, I said to the rest of the scholars, I said, what's the problem? And we all agreed. Again, it's the information or misinformation and no information, not knowing. And I'm going to bring my example that I was going to mention earlier into this.
I honestly think it's groundbreaking. It's going to be opening many eyes. Because for a very long time, people have not been having these products.
You're right, absolutely.
So, Brother Sayyid was mentioning, myself likewise, for several years have not had M&M.
Yes.
Because of this information. So, Imam Sahib, are you telling me I can go out and have M&Ms tonight?
Yes.
So that 7-year talaq I had given to it, I can do rujoo now.
And I'll tell you why I'm smiling is because, you say you've not been, and there's been a lot of our Muslims
Okay,
who have been in
Magnum.
that position. Yes.
The ice cream, huge campaign that's haram as well. Any comments on that?
Can I?
go on.
Can I add also to that?
Yeah.
Now, the difference, for example, M&M and Magnum. So when myself or anybody we go shopping, what I look for now is that label suitable for vegetarian, right?
Okay, good
Now,
question. Yeah.
That for me makes me feel content. Okay, if it's suitable for
Yes.
vegetarian, it's halal. Obviously,
Yes.
with it not having alcohol,
Yeah.
etc. Now, Magnum doesn't say suitable vegetarian. All other sweets do. For example, if you look at all the other dairy milk, etc., they
Yes.
all do.
Yes.
But why does the M&M not say suitable for vegetarian? So for me, when I looked at the sweets, I'm not eating M&Ms because it doesn't say suitable, and then it makes sense. Oh, they say it's not halal. Oh, that makes sense now. Same with Magnum. Magnum's probably one of the. There's other ice creams as well that doesn't say.
So in terms of ice creams, you'll never have suitable for vegetarians or vegans on
any
there.
ice cream.
No, why? Because milk products, dairy, it's from animals. Okay, so this is one of the first things. The second thing is that you mentioned about the vegetarian sign on M&Ms and stuff. Again, because the colors are derived from the animals, they won't put the vegetarian logo on it. Now, if an individual, if a Muslim takes the position, I will only eat something with a vegetarian logo on it, then that's a safe option to have. What it means is that they will exclude a lot of halal things as well, but it means that everything that they eat will be halal, with the caveat that you mentioned of alcohol, because a product can contain alcohol and still be vegetarian.
So it's not just sufficient to see the vegetarian sign and just pick it up.
No. For example, chocolates. We know that chocolates, especially these assorted chocolate boxes that you give, as presents and so on, they can often contain alcohol in them. And again, when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to halal and haram and certifying, we have certain criteria, and we label it as beverage alcohol and as chemical alcohol. So chemical alcohol we don't even worry about that. But beverage
for
alcohol.
our viewers, quickly.
Yes.
What's the difference between a beverage alcohol and a chemical alcohol?
So beverage alcohol is what people drink. Okay, so whether all the different forms, whiskey and beer and vodka and whatever people drink, that's all beverage alcohol. So even if there's a tiny amount of that in something,
a percentage,
half a percent, 0.25%, we will not allow that as.
So on your board, it's
not acceptable. On the other hand, you've got alcohols, we know that alcohols are a chemical, okay? They're used as a solvent. So I remember the very famous black soft drink, I'm not going to say the name, but cola, okay? Cola can be any brand, okay? There was a big drive, I remember a few years ago, don't drink cola, it's haram, it contains alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't contain alcohol. What does happen is in its manufacturing process, a form of alcohol, which is not beverage alcohol, it's a chemical, it's a solvent, is used to dissolve the ingredients.
It's not the khamr which the
It's not the khamr. Correct. That's
Let's just
again,
make that clear for the viewer.
So
It's
beverage
not khamr.
alcohol, the reason why beverage alcohol is haram is because it's the ruling of khamr.
Yeah.
Which is what Allah mentions in the Quran, as you said.
إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه.
Exactly.
Straight away. It's a straight up answer.
Straight answer, no. Because it's intoxicating.
Okay.
Ethanol or other forms of chemical alcohol, if you drink it, it'll just burn the insides of you out. You'll be gone. You can't even drink it.
Okay.
So, however, it's used in production processes. So it's used as a solvent to dissolve things. Do you know, for example, in houses we have PVC plastic window frames.
Yep.
Even plastics are manufactured using alcohols. Okay,
alcohol chemical.
Correct, alcohol chemical,
Just
not
on
beverage
that note,
alcohol.
this is hence why the perfumes are allowed, aren't they?
Correct, absolutely.
Alcohol perfumes.
Absolutely.
And you'll be surprised, ulama, from back home
Yes.
who don't have the education till today are giving the fatwa.
They are,
Till
absolutely.
today are giving the fatwa, it's not halal.
Yeah.
It's haram.
Bilkul. And subhanAllah, that's why I was so amazed when my Ustad Grami Mufti Rafiq al-Hasni Saab in his
Allah give him long
book,
life.
Ameen. In his book, he's broken down Rafiq al-Fuqaha, he's broken down the different types of alcohol and, you know, propranolol and butane and all of these. And I was scratching my head thinking, you know,
Ustad Saab, how do you know
Ustad
this?
Saab from that generation, you know, and, you know, to look at these, mashallah, you know, but, you know, we need more of this. So that is chemical alcohol. That is completely different. It's treated completely different to this beverage or khamr, as we will say.
That's fine. So that's the type of stuff that they are using in cola and other.
Correct. Yeah.
sweets
And then what
products.
happens is that the production process evaporates all of it. There's nothing. There's nothing left of it in the product. However, there might be trace elements, but those trace elements are not haram because it's not from khamr anyway. It's a chemical.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to fire some names at you.
Yes.
So you've already mentioned Weetabix, yeah?
Yes.
So in terms of, I think we've done enough on the processing.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk a little bit about meat itself,
Yes.
because that's another element of your auditing, and which HMC does,
Yes.
HFA also does.
Yes.
Meat products. Now, I mean, in the market, there's a lot of products, meat coming from New Zealand
Yes.
in some supermarkets, and it's considerably cheaper
Yes.
than our Asian or halal butchers. That meat is cheaper.
Yes.
Is that really halal?
So let me
Any
explain.
clarification on that one?
Let me explain that. So, countries such as New Zealand and Australia, a lot of their meat by default is halal.
How?
The reason is they are big exporters into the Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia,
okay,
and
that
Malaysia,
makes
because
sense.
it's that part of the world. So, bulk of their customers are Muslims. And again, it doesn't often make sense to have two different processes. So, by default, often, not always, but often, it's I would say, majority of the meat is automatically halal slaughtered. Now, just because something's halal slaughtered doesn't mean it's halal when you're buying it or when it's on the plate in front of you. Why? Because what now matters is what has happened to that meat from it being slaughtered in the halal way, with the tasmiyah being read on it, Bismillah Allahu Akbar, by a Muslim slaughterman, and then what happens to it after that.
Without these stunning and...
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. So with something that is going into the halal market, certified halal, it'll be treated according to the conditions, strict conditions of segregation, no cross-contamination, etc., all the way till it reaches the end user, the meat shop or the supplier or whatever. The problem we've got with this meat, which is in the supermarkets, which comes from those same sources, and I watched, somebody showed me a video on social media where there's codes, meat have codes on it, and what this gentleman was doing was going into famous supermarkets, and he was identifying the codes on those legs of lambs and so on. He was then checking on the internet and saying, look, this is halal, and he's right, the code for that carcass was halal. It was halal slaughtered. It was halal at the time it was slaughtered and cut, etc. However, because it's in the freezer of the non-halal meat, why haven't they labeled it halal at the supermarket? The reason is because it has not followed the halal requirements from there till it reached the store. They cannot guarantee. We don't know what happened to it. It was hung in the same van with the pork. It was so, and that's why, yes, it was originally halal. But is it halal now? Nobody can say, therefore treat it as non-halal. So
you would advise picking up that, that meat from New Zealand?
No, unless the supermarket has a section labelled halal and that same piece of meat is in the halal section, then we can safely...
Not in the general meat?
Not in the general meat. Then we can safely know that this has been treated in a halal way all the way from the beginning to the end. And this leads me on to another very, very important point which has just entered my mind.
Credit where it's due, because they are ethically following our principles so strictly.
Subhanallah. You've hit the nail on the head.
Which even our Muslim butchers are not doing.
No. Shall I tell you something
our Muslims
horrifying?
in Muslim countries wouldn't follow this up so strictly, as the West is doing, or non-Muslim production or bigger companies are not taking that precaution as you're describing?
You see, the thing is, these the countries that we're living in, these people, when they make a claim, whether that be a halal claim, whether that be vegan, vegetarian, or any kind of claim, they will make sure that they adhere to all the parameters and all the requirements to make that claim. Because if they're making a claim, it's now a legal requirement to make sure they have fulfilled that. Whereas our people, as you've just mentioned, there is no. But one thing very horrifying, and I'm going to say this to create a bit of controversy.
Go for it.
Chicken, right? Chicken and meat which has been slaughtered by the Jews, okay, which the Quran tells us is halal. It is often rejected by the Jews, the Jewish community, and it comes into the Muslim halal supply chain.
Allah.
So it's accepted halal by the Muslim standards
and rejected by them.
Wow. Just talking about this adherence to standards.
Ethics, isn't it?
Ethics
is what we're really referring to.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that that's not halal. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is how relaxed our people are with the standards. Now, the point that I was going to make was in terms of also the meat, and you mentioned stunning, and that's something which is very, very, very important.
Okay.
There's a huge misconception surrounding stunning.
Okay.
What people...
Now, what I've also heard is different governing bodies like HMC or HFA, they have different policies or different principles.
Look,
is that the case?
It is the case. Look,
and how does that differ? How does that make a difference?
So the ahsan position, the best position, is that chicken or meat should be consumed without stunning.
Okay.
That's the ideal position, and it's the best position. It's the ahsan position. Okay.
And that's something that HMC.
That's HMC
policy.
Follow that. That's their policy. That's down to the T, which is
so
fine.
If you've seen a HMC, it's not
you know
stunned.
that it's not stunned and it's not a problem.
Okay.
The challenge we have there is, if that's the case, all of the big brands you mentioned at the beginning, all the fast food chains and so on, the big brands that we see, the Yellow Arches and the KFCs and all of the Nando's you mentioned, and all of these, their policy of these large corporations is that they will only allow meat which has been stunned into their stores. Okay.
Only stunned meat.
Why? Because according to their understanding, it's more animal safe and animal welfare that the animal is stunned before slaughtering.
So
they
the policy
do it from
of KFC, Nando's,
all
Subway.
of the big brands. Okay, their policy is to conform to animal welfare standards. The meat must be, or the chicken must be stunned. Otherwise, we will not.
So would I be correct in saying that Nando's are not taking HMC meat?
Correct. So this is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So no HMC meat you will find in these stores. What that then does is it limits the Muslim consumer, that it cannot eat from any of these stores. Okay. So now let's look at the masala. Is stunning permissible in Sharia? The simple answer to that is yes, it is. Fatwas have been given by many ulama. We don't need to go into that.
In principle, it's allowed.
In principle. Why? As long as condition is that the stunning is not the cause of death for the animal. That's the key thing. The stunning does not cause death, but it is the slaughtering, the knife, which has caused the death of the animal. Okay. Now, when I am working on behalf of the HFA and we look at this stunning process, we have developed parameters. So we have parameters on the voltage. It cannot be below this voltage. It cannot be higher than this. Based on information and research which has been done over a number of years, where we know that that animal will not die. It will be paralyzed for a short space of time. And you know what? It's about 30-40 seconds. And that shock is then, they come out of that shock. Okay?
Have you seen videos where it's not on that belt and it comes
yes,
across?
Correct.
It
Absolutely.
pass through water.
Yes.
Come out.
Bilkul.
And then by the time it gets to the person stood there, he will then have a knife in his hand
Yes.
and say, Bismillah, Allah Akbar.
Absolutely. That's the process. Now, on this, the example I was going to give you before, there was a I received a phone call one night, and the person was very distressed. He said that an owner of a KFC franchise has contacted me. I'm going to try not to say names or whatever because I don't want to identify the people. But in a certain part of the UK, his sales were immense. And then all of a sudden, at Jummah, one Maulvi Saab in a big masjid turned around and said, oh, KFC used stunned chicken, it's halal. He lost his business. So you get 80% of his business overnight went. And they called me distressed saying, listen, help us here. So what did we do? I invited that alim and 4 or 5 other leading scholars in the UK. I said, listen, what do you understand of this process? Have you seen it? No. Why did you make this claim? X, Y, Z, so and so told me. I said, but you never did your due diligence as an alim. You should have verified. You can't make a claim on the mimbar without having verified it. Come with me. I took them to a slaughterhouse, 4 or 5 hours drive from here. We got there at 5 a.m. in the morning. I showed them the whole process with the parameters that we have in place. And in the meeting room afterwards, we were sat there and those scholars were mortified. They were fuming. How dare somebody give us this misinformation? And the words are, wallahi, the words he said were that this is more halal than halal. In other words, that there's no question over the hillat of this chicken. I said, exactly, now that you've seen it and you've understood it, you are now comfortable. Okay. So that is the level to which we do that work. And if we don't do that work, it means that our Muslim consumers can then not go to these places. On the same
our
note,
local meat then,
yes,
that's being sold around, let's say, we speak of Manchester at least.
Yes.
A few famous roads, you go Wimbledon Road,
yes,
2 big meat shops there.
Yes.
In Wall Range, you've got the Clarendon Road, Pakistani shops, as we refer to them. There's 5-6 shops come together.
Bilkul.
Where is all that meat coming from? And is that all audited? Is it all certified?
So
how confidently can we buy from them?
So when it comes to the local meat shops and retailers, I can't comment on any individual meat shop or store. What I will say this is to the consumers, to people like you and me who are going to those shops, is ask them, do they have any kind of certification in place? And if they do, ask to see it. That look, or where do you get your meat from? Because ultimately, what's going to determine if it's halal or haram is not what happens at the meat shop, but what happens at the slaughterhouse. Okay. So which slaughterhouses are you getting it from? So do your verification. But on that note also, because it's on a street level, on an individual level, we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that if you go to the house of a mu'min, don't even ask them, is it halal? Yeah. However, in this case, of course, you're buying something, ask the question, but there also must be an element of trust that that person is a person of iman.
I guess the question is, if your taqwa is like the taqwa of Imam Abu Hanifa,
yes,
then you wouldn't have meat for 8 years because a sheep was stolen in your locality.
Absolutely.
Yeah? If you're at that level, then do so. And if you're not, then don't cause misinformation
and don't cause fitna
in the community by spreading
fitna
rumors.
Is the word, bilkul.
We saw recently, without mentioning name,
yes,
a big Asian supermarket where their meat was last year Ramadan.
Right.
Within the first week of Ramadan, a video became viral that all their meat is non-certified, is haram.
Allahu Akbar.
It put so many people off. There was misconceptions for many months.
Yes.
Till now, I know friends that don't go down to that shop now.
Yeah, and it's so bad. You've destroyed somebody's business. And whether the first
could that
thing
be done by another business just to shut them down, gun them down?
It does happen. This is the thing. It does happen. It happens a lot. People will throw, as I say, shosha out to throw people off to cause detriment to somebody's business, and that is just so un-Islamic in every way, shape, and form.
Okay, I'm going to ask the cameraman to message me how many minutes you have left, because I've got quite a few questions still left, and this is getting spicy now.
Yeah.
Okay, as we're on the meat subject,
yes,
lab-grown meat.
Yes, that's an interesting one.
Where do you go with that?
Now, look, lab-grown meat, of course, it's already taking place because
it's the future now, isn't it?
It is. I'll tell you why. The demand for meat and chicken now, the farmers cannot. If you brought all the farms together in the entire world, it cannot meet the current demand for chicken and meat. Okay, particularly chicken, more so than the meat. But
just yesterday we were doing a podcast and a lot of these gym fanatics.
Yeah.
All they need is protein.
Protein, that's right.
That was never the case many years ago.
No.
A generation ago.
No.
Now the demand for protein is so high for everything that they want to have. It has to be protein.
It has to be protein. Bilkul.
So naturally the demand is much higher.
It's much higher for lots and also with the growing population. So what people have started doing is growing meat in the lab. Now, first of all, how does lab grown meat work? What they do is they take a culture of cells from the meat, they put it in a petri dish with the certain nutrients and so on, and they grow that meat. Okay, they multiply it chemically, and they can have a leg of chicken or a breast of chicken or whatever, literally, or a full chicken even, and they can modify it so it's without bones and so on and so forth. So it's easier then to process it, cuts down costs. Is it halal or haram? Now, this is still work in progress, of course, but from my research and my conversation with scholars who are fuqaha, senior scholars, they have said that at the minute where we stand, without knowing too much information about the production process, 2 points. Number one, if these cells which are taken to grow the meat are from a halal slaughtered animal, then it will be halal, number one. Number two, the source of nutrients in the petri dish, the agar, etc., must also be halal in terms of where the source of that is from.
I mean, falling through every ingredient that's going to be used.
Yes.
In the production, it has to be from a halal source.
Halal source. And as long as it's from a halal slaughtered animal and everything is halal, then the end meat which is produced will also be halal. That's currently where we stand. But of course, as information and processes grow and you learn, that might change in the future, but that at the minute is where the ruling stands. So it's an interesting one. It's a watch this space type of scenario.
Okay, nice. But, okay, another one, I think a burning question, which I don't want to dodge, and I want to tackle it head on, which is the question about gelatine.
Okay.
A lot of products that we use now, sweets, for example, Haribos, it will still have gelatine in it, but now we have halal Haribo.
Yes.
Gelatine, what's the hukum on that?
Okay, so
if you go through the breakdown of that, the fiqh behind it, what the current fatwa is, ethics behind it, and where do we draw the line?
Okay, so the first thing is you mentioned food and sweets and so on, but actually medicines also contain gelatin. Whether it's capsules, whether certain injections, vaccines, certain vaccines will contain sources of animal or gelatin and so on. So first of all, gelatin, not paracetamol itself, but if it's
amoxicillins and
amoxicillin, but paracetamol, even if it's in a capsule form,
in a capsule form,
the capsule itself could contain gelatin. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the ruling on gelatin is this, that there's in our books of fiqh, for example, Allama Shami has written this, other fuqaha have written this, and they have given the example that if a swine falls into a salt mine and then it goes through chemical and physical change, it means it lies there, the salt degrades it over a period of time, such to the point where it's now just particles. The original swine is no longer then, because remember one thing, one of the principles of Sharia is ta'rif, is the definition of something. Okay, now what the fuqaha have said is that once that has undergone that physical and chemical change and degradation, the ta'rif for that, you can no longer call it a swine. Okay, you can no longer call a pig. Okay, because of the salt, because of the chemical change and the physical change, now that has changed, the hukum will also change. So the hukum of swine cannot now apply to that. It will be a different hukum.
But just on that point, but ethically, of course, we will remove that bit of the salt, wouldn't you?
Yes, of course. So what
if
they say,
it could be traced, if it could be known that if an animal or even a human, for worst case scenario, was to fall in there, degrade, turn into salt after many months. Absolutely. That portion will be removed anyway.
Yeah, it's removed. Look,
if it wasn't,
for the sake of taqwa and for the sake of understanding, yes. In practice, That's exactly what would happen. But just purely from the point of a technical fiqhi and shari'i masala, is that halal or haram? Because of it's undergone the change, it's technically halal. However, in practice, it is not used. Why? Because no alim has got their taqwa holds them back to say, no, this is not something, because remember, swine itself is najis ayn. Okay, no part of the swine itself can be used for anything, consumption, wearing, etc., etc., particularly in the Hanafi fiqh. However, as a point of masala, that gelatin then, which is derived from that, can be technically halal. In practice now, what happens is that these halal gelatines we have, they are sourced from bovines, so they are sourced from cows. That's why it's
from
halal.
Halal animals.
From halal animals, basically. Okay. And there again, it's better that the animal has been halal slaughtered. But even if it hasn't been halal slaughtered, because of the chemical and physical change, the gelatin has undergone physical and chemical change. Therefore, the ruling of that will not be the same as the original non-slaughtered cow, which would have been haram. Let me give you an example. Vinegar. Vinegar is not just halal, it's sunnah. Okay, it's sunnah. It is the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to consume vinegar. Okay, how does vinegar start off? Vinegar starts off as khamr. It starts off as beverage alcohol, which is qat'i haram. There is no debate over it. You get a glass of wine, you put a spoon or 2 spoons of salt in it and leave it for a few weeks. What happens? It undergoes a physical and chemical change. It draws in the OH group, draws in an oxygen. It becomes the OOH group, and now it becomes acetic acid, which is vinegar. So over a number of days or weeks, that which was alcohol becomes acetic acid, which is vinegar. So all of the vinegars, malt vinegar, the vinegar we put on our fish and chips, to any vinegar which we pick up, apple cider vinegar, all of these vinegars all originate as alcohols. But what has happened is they have gone through a process which in Sharia we call istihala or tabdil al-ma'i. Okay, it means it has totally changed its physical and chemical properties. Now the ruling of what's left after those 2 spoons of, I'm saying 2 spoons, but as an example, but after the salt has been added, the what is left at the end of the process is not the same as what we started
vinegar.
with. It is now vinegar, but it started as alcohol. Now, if somebody said, I'm not going to drink that vinegar or eat that vinegar because it's haram, it started out as alcohol, which was qat'i, not just haram, by the way, it was qat'i haram. They'd be wrong in doing that, because they're not just denying something which is halal, they're denying something which is sunnah.
I think we're going to be a bit technical for the viewers then.
Yes.
So all these sweets and products that we're having,
look,
quickly summarizing, we went from Weetabix to Kellogg's to Oreo to M&M's and Magnum. Now we're talking about Haribo's.
Yes. Look,
the entire spectrum.
Look, with gelatin, let me say this, that gelatin in and of itself is halal no matter what source it comes from. Okay. However, what we need to do is check if something comes from a pork gelatin, a swine gelatin, then it's something that we should stay away from. Because it's also najas. It's not just the issue of hillat and hurmat, but there's also an issue of najasa, and that also applies to alcohol. I don't know if you have time today, but maybe that's another conversation. But
very quickly, one more before we leave.
Yes, go.
Halal wine. It's another thing that's coming up again and again on social media.
Yeah, look,
halal wine.
So again, we've been asked to certify and logo brands of halal wine, and so what that means is basically drinks with 0% alcohol. Okay, so it's effectively grape juice or apple juice or whatever, sparkling and so on, and it's undergone a process, and they will bottle it in like champagne bottles and other which resemble alcohol bottles, which are commonly found in liquor stores, etc. Now, some companies approached us and asked us to certify them, but as a board of scholars, we decided against it. We said, even though binafsihi, it's halal to drink, we're not going to label it halal. Why? Because there is the issue of resemblance. And there's many hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ that rulings can apply to something when it resembles another. Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhu. So
and then this entire, what we call in the English, we call it the grey area.
Yeah, that's exactly.
I was just reading here, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam described that فَإِنَّ الْحَلَالَ بَيِّنٌ وَإِنَّ الْحَرَامَ بَيِّنٌ وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُسْتَبِهَاتٌ. That between halal and haram, there's a grey area.
Subhanallah. I was just teaching this hadith on the weekend.
لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ.
Bilkul.
Majority of people will not know which way to stand. Is it is it halal or is it haram?
Yes.
فَمَنِ اتَّقَى مِنَ الْمُشْتَبِهَاتِ فَقَدْ اسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ.
Yes.
And if you were to refrain from the grey area, then you've protected and saved your Imam.
Yeah. So this is what I want to say here. I mean, I'm going through the Arba'in of Imam Nawawi, and that particular hadith we did on this weekend.
Yes,
so, yes, there is the clear, permitted, not permitted, and the grey area in between.
For a Muslim, what's the hukum then?
Look, the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith narrated by Imam Nawawi, in that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ used the example of a shepherd who grazes his sheep near land which does not belong to it, that they're not permitted to graze on. Sooner or later, the sheep will enter that land because they're close to it. So when you're getting close to haram or close to something which is not permissible, sooner or later, the risk is there that you enter upon the haram and you end up doing something which you should not be doing. So for us, we should stay away from those grey areas.
It's like the classic example ulama give, like drinking from a wine cup.
Yes, exactly.
Ulama will prohibit that because soon enough, when you pick it up in that particular way, and it has, let's say, apple juice in it.
Yes.
And now, for somebody young who doesn't understand or appreciate what he's doing, it's a wine glass.
It's a wine glass.
It's got apple juice in it.
That's
looks like wine.
And because of that likeness, that tashabba, then it's not permissible.
Direction.
Again, for example, the ruling in fiqh of praying salah in a qabristan. Why is it prohibited? In and of itself, it shouldn't have been a problem. But the reason was people will think you are prostrating to the graves. Okay? So likewise here, even though the drink itself might be halal, we refrain from certifying it because of the likeness with that, and then all the misconceptions that it creates, and the doubt that it starts to create in the minds of people, because that's a responsibility we have at the end of the day. So this is something that we need to all be aware of, inshallah.
Okay, once I just finish off and we talked about Weetabix and all these brands. They don't particularly, and they wouldn't put the halal sign on it.
Not always. Sometimes they do.
Okay, you would then have the what they call the
E471s and all of these different. Those. Yeah. Look.
Are they?
Again, look. Emulsifiers is something which and Rene, animal Rene, for example. What most of the people that are calling these things haram, what they don't even understand is that Imam Azam Abu Hanifa has labelled them halal. That's the funny thing. Animal Rene from an animal source is labelled halal by Imam Azam Abu Hanifa anyway.
Okay.
So according to us, they're not even halal. Okay, but even if we took the other school, they're not even haram, sorry, they are halal. But even if we took some of the other schools that say that they are haram, again, because depending on the nature of the processes it's gone through, if it's gone through istihala or tabdil al-ma'i, where it's changed its physical and chemical composition, then it's no longer the animal it started with, therefore it ends up as something which is potentially halal.
Okay, any major brands that we need to avoid that you know from your auditing 9-8 year experience?
It's difficult to say, and I'll tell you why. Things are changing massively. Even some of these big sweet brands, there's one not far from here, big sweet brand, all our they make these drumsticks and so on and so forth. That's another company that I go to regularly, and they have now changed all of what they're doing is, remember I mentioned about the quality of the product. They use certain gelatins because they want it a certain quality and consistency. Okay. They've developed new gelatins, halal and vegetable source, which now conform to those qualities. So they've actually discarded pork gelatin in all of their products, bar a handful. It's actually changing. So those products where once upon a time I would have said, avoid these, stay away from them. It's no longer the case. Times are changing. Stay informed. Do your research and ask the
anywhere
people
we
who
can
know.
actually go to know this stuff. So today we look
so-
at you have yourself here.
Yeah.
Do you have any website where we can, for example, I can put in a name of a brand or a
It's difficult. It's difficult.
Frosties, Cocoa Pops. Put it in. Does it give me
What
an answer?
the only thing, no, not yet. There isn't any such website, and so I suppose that's probably some good work that can be done. A database where you can put in a name and it tells you halal or haram. Nothing like that exists in the UK or even in the West at the minute. However, if you want to know, contact the manufacturers or go to the manufacturer's website. So, for example, if we say Kellogg's, you can actually go to their websites, and if they're halal certified, they have their certificate on the website, so you can view it. Okay, and if they don't, you can email them and they'll respond back to tell you that yes we do, no we don't, it is halal or it's not halal. They are very open with that information. But to finish, I just remembered something I was going to say earlier when we were talking about the stages of halal from the source to the table. We go to restaurants. So somebody was inviting me for dinner. They called me and said, Azad, we'll go to X restaurant. And I said, okay, is it halal? And they said, yes, it is. I was doubtful. I said, really? So I called. He said, yeah, we've been going there and so on. So TK. So I called the restaurant and I said, is your meat halal? They said, yes, it is. I said, do you make a halal claim? They said, no, we don't make a halal claim.
Okay.
I said, why is that? They said, well, our meat all comes from halal shops, but we don't separate it in the kitchen.
Okay.
So I said, Allahu Akbar. Thank you very much. The consumer needs to know, just because the restaurant says that our chicken, our lamb, our beef is halal, it doesn't mean that when it's on the table in front of them, it's halal. What you need to ask is, do they make a halal claim? If they claim that we are serving halal food, then that's fine. It means that they are following procedures to keep that food segregated. They're not mixing pork, they're not mixing anything non-halal in that and contaminating it and causing problems. So Muslims have this misconception that just because they're using halal meat, it means that we can eat from there. So please, that's something we need to know.
Very last one, Imam Saab. If our viewers want to contact yourself directly, is that possible?
Yes. So
any email address that you could share live?
So at the minute, sh.abuyusha@gmail.com. Alternatively, on Facebook, you can go to Sheikh Abu Yusha and message me.
What I'll do is I'll leave that as under the comments.
Yes.
Your email address.
Yep, absolutely.
So if anybody wants to contact you directly regarding any products or any questions, they can ask you directly.
Facebook, email, and I'll try my best to answer.
Jazakallah,
I'm not the best at getting back to
your
people
clarification.
on messages.
I think this has been an eye-opener for everyone.
Alhamdulillah.
And the first thing I'm going to do is have M&M's. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.